Let me call us to order here. Just going to get started on our program. Going to continue eating and enjoying the food, but we are here for a special occasion, and I want to welcome you on behalf of all the faculty and the staff and the entire student body in the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences to the Charles Lindley Lecture. We started this several years ago, and this year we're going to have just an outstanding speaker, and I know the attendance here is as a result of your interest in our speaker. But before we have any further comments or on the program, well, I've asked Dr. Angus Ketchot if he would come and give our invocation.
All right, let's pray. Lord, just thank you so much for this time together, Lord. Just the opportunity to get together with other colleagues and faculty, Lord, and just fellowship, Lord, and just have fun, Lord. And we just thank you for agriculture and just our ability, what we can do to help feed and clothe this world, Lord. We just pray this year that we'll be good stewards of all the land and the opportunities that you've given us. And we'll use those gifts, Lord, to further your kingdom. We ask you now to bless this food, use it for the nourishment of our body. In your name, amen.
Thank you. Man, wasn't that food good? Charlie, you outdid yourself. Mr. Charlie Williams. If you ain't from around here, you may not know how good he is, but many of us know because we've had a chance to enjoy Charlie's catering and over and over, and he really did a great job, Charlie. Like I mentioned, this lecture today is the Charles Lindley Lecture. Dr. Lindley was former dean of our college. Some of you may have known him. He was many years ago. I want to also thank, we coordinated this with a special event of our students. I see many of our graduate students here. I'm so glad that you're here, so many of our faculty, but we organized this event to be in conjunction with the Future of Agriculture graduate student competition. How important that is. And I want to say special thanks to all the faculty that were involved. I had a list here, but I'm afraid I'd leave someone off. But you know who you are, and it's a great event, annual event. We've been doing this now for a few years. The college has been involved, the experiment station, and the extension service, and our industry judges come to campus to help judge the graduate student competition and actually give our chance to expose what a great group of graduate students we have. We have some special guests here. Everyone here is special, but I do want to recognize our Vice President, Dr. Greg Bohaj, our Vice President for Research and Economic Development, Dr. David Shaw, our Associate Provost, Dr. Peter Ryan. I saw Peter. People, just raise your hand. Gary couldn't be with us. Gary Jackson's not feeling well today, but Dr. Joe Streets, our Associate Director for Extension, is here, and Dr. Reuben Moore, Associate Director for Experiment Station. Special guest here, Dr. Rodney Foyle and his wife Rosalind, our retired emeritus Vice President for the division, and our former Dean, Dr. Fox. Dr. Fox, we're so glad to have you back and visiting with your good friend. I do appreciate you being here. And also I want to introduce Tom Lawrence. Tom, we appreciate you being here, and Deborah Carpenter, who's here with the Carpenters for the book signing, etc. It's a great event. I hope that you enjoy the lecture today. I know you will. And my good friend, who is personal friends with Dr. Carpenter, is here to introduce Dr. Carpenter today, David Shaw.
Well, George is exactly right. When I heard that Will was coming to campus for the book signing, I immediately contacted his office and said I'd love to get the chance to get together with Will and his beautiful wife, Helen. Scott came back and said, well, would you be interested in introducing? And I said, well, you don't have to ask twice on that. I'm here to introduce you to a prince of an individual. When I talk about Will Carpenter, really four things immediately come to my mind: Morehead, Mississippi, Monsanto, the Weed Science Society of America, and chemical weapons control. And I'm sure if you've not had the opportunity yet to see Will's book, I would highly encourage you to get a copy. Obviously, take advantage of the signing activities that are going on this afternoon. But as I read through it, I told Thomas when we sat down at lunch, Thomas did a wonderful job of capturing Will's personality as well as his words. And there were so many places where I got a chuckle because as I read, he really did a great job in being able to say it the way that Will would have said it. And so you'll thoroughly enjoy that. Will, of course, is a 1952 graduate and very proud alumnus of Mississippi State University. From there, he launched a career that spanned several decades and ultimately culminated in his term as vice president at Monsanto. And again, just to take a side note, several things that happened that were recorded in the book that Will and Thomas put together. I found it very interesting to reflect back in the experiences that I've had both as a weed scientist myself and also in working with Monsanto as a company, and to be able to read the book and to be able to better understand even the character of the company and the decisions that the company was making through the eyes of Will, and seeing the imprint that Will had in the character of the company was revealing and was very insightful. And so again, I would highly recommend that to you. You know, Will has so many things that I could mention, and I certainly don't want to take away from his time. But I would say that the position that he was in as Vice President and Chairman of the Corporate Biotechnology Strategy Committee, and then ultimately serving as in his position as Vice President and General Manager of the New Products Division at the culmination of his career with Monsanto, speaks volumes, because the decisions that Will was involved in the development of biotechnology and things that are old hat to us today, words like Roundup Ready, were a dream that Will had the opportunity to take advantage of. But I would also say that Will, in many ways, had so much more of an impact than just the development of the biotechnology program at Monsanto. Will's reach truly was global in so many perspectives, and not just in herbicides and pesticide development. Will was very, very deeply involved in the worldwide chemical weapons treaty negotiations, and ultimately served as the chair of the Chemical Manufacturers Association Treaty Committee, and then was recognized. He was awarded with the Hilliard Roderick Prize and Medal in Science for Arms Control and International Security. Will did some tremendous work with the Organization for Prohibition of Chemical Weapons and was named co-chair of the board for that. Now, from a more personal standpoint, as a young weed scientist back in the early 80s, I can tell you that one of those revered names in the Weed Science Society of America and the Southern Weed Science Society and the North Central Weed Science Society was this gentleman from Monsanto named Will Carpenter. And for me personally to be able to stand up here, having dreamed of being able to be associated with one of the icons, one of the founding fathers, if you would, for the discipline that I have spent my life associated with, is one of those dreams come true for me. Will has served as the president for WSSA, was named as a fellow, and as you'll read in the book, was probably the one that was most responsible for it being able to right its financial resources and get back in the black instead of being in the red that it had run for a number of years. I highly recommend the book. Again, you're going to be able to read in it things like Will becoming the executive in residence here at Mississippi State, and recognizing that academia does not operate quite like a business does. You'll be able to walk through key decisions at every point in the chemical weapons negotiations. You'll be able to recognize, number one, and first and foremost, what a saint his wife Helen is. And you're going to be able to understand that this gentleman had the opportunity to rub shoulders with true world leaders at so many different stages of his career. Please help me welcome our speaker for the Charles Lindley series, Dr. Will Carpenter.
First, let me promise you that I will help you remember that every person has a dark side. I will expose you to 2 or 3 of my darker sides in addition to all the other things we've talked about. First of all, I think it's appropriate for me to thank 3 special people that got me here. First of all, as David said, my good wife. And there I'm thanking her for 54 years while I gallivanted around into some 78 countries during my career, and she kept things together at home. On a more recent note, Deborah and Tom brought the discipline to me that was sadly lacking because of my ability to procrastinate, and it's for them and them only that there's a book here for sale. And I really appreciate what they have done to make that a great book. Let me give you a perspective that I hope you will keep in mind throughout this talk. I am completely devoted to the land grant system. First of all, virtually everybody that had an influence on my life was either a product of or a member of a land-grant university. Several of them are in this room today, like Dr. Foyle and Dr. Fox. But I regard the land-grant system as easily the most valuable thing that ever came out of the halls of Congress once we get past the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. I believe that the concepts of a land-grant system have been lost in other parts of our society, and as a result, we're floundering in many areas because we do not understand the principles that made our land-grant system great, and especially this university. Incidentally, I can tell you exactly when I became a part of Mississippi State. It was July the 13th, 1930, and the reason I can remember that was my birthday. That was when I was born, and my dad had already been a county agent for 16 years. By the time I was 6, I was riding around with him. So that I have not walked away from being a part of a land-grant system for the last 84 years. Now then, let me get to a chronology here, and let me kind of bounce around. There were 4 things that happened to me before I was 10 years old that started out as lemons and became lemonade. The first one was I was a puny kid. If I'd have been a pig, I'd been the runt in the litter. But at any rate, because of that, I had 4 older sisters, and my parents took me under the arm, and by the time I was 4, they had taught me to read, which is and been a substantial pleasure. At 7, I had the unfortunate experience of having diphtheria. And this was long before vaccines and penicillin and so forth. And once again, if I'd been a dog or a pig, they'd put me in a sack and drop me in the river. But I managed to get through. The third thing that happened, and those two fit lemons, this one's not. I had a grammar school superintendent who was decades ahead of his time. And with that, I'm going to go in some specifics. When I had diphtheria, and the rest was 3 months of the cure, and he showed up at my parents and said, you know, he's going to be bored to tears lying in that bed. And they said, yeah. He says, well, don't worry about his studies, but the only thing he can do is read. So between he and my parents, they ordered a bunch of books. And it was about like this, this. And the books came in about 2 weeks. And it was the Iliad and the Odyssey, a summary version of opera, a history of middle-age history of Europe, and on and on and on. And there I lay in that bed. Well, hell, I read them all. I didn't know anything, wasn't anything else to do, so I read them. And so that's one way of saying a lemonade from lemons. Well, the next step was, when I was 10, this superintendent read in one of the educational journals about some professor in the Northeast had figured out how to teach people read faster. It was the first publication of the so-called rapid reading. He wrote to this professor and said, would you send me all of your stuff? I'm a grammar school superintendent in Moorhead, Mississippi, and I would sure like to try to teach myself and some students. He picked 6 of us, and the 7 of us learned how to rapid read in 1940. And it stayed with me until today. And I must say, that was a big plus towards a life in science. And everything that I'm talking about here, for the most part, either I did it or got involved in it because of a life in science, or I did it or because of it, a life in science demanded that I do it and I wanted to do it. However, back to my initial remarks, I do think you should understand there's another side. For instance, to my knowledge, after 75 years, I am still the only person in the Moorhead, Mississippi that was expelled from Vacation Bible School. And it really wasn't anything intentional. On the way to class that day, I found 2 lovely green snakes, and before I knew it, I was ready to go into class, so I tucked them in my shirt. And just as the teacher was asking me a question, the snakes decided to come out, and she let out a scream and went one way. The principal escorted me out of the building another way, and I was wise enough that from then on until Vacation Bible School was over, I got up and left home at the time I would to go to Vacation Bible School, and I came home, but in the meantime, I'd been wandering up and down the bow or doing something, and thank goodness my parents didn't discover that I had been expelled until sometime later. But a couple of more, once again, it's only fair. On real wet, snowy days in Moorhead, which were, once or twice a year, rabbits simply would not move. They would sit tight. And I found that early in the morning, before it began to melt, and I would take what I called a crocus sack, I could usually catch a couple of them and stick them in the sack. Well, at school, the janitors, in order to show the teachers that they had cleaned the room, with the last thing, they would turn the waste paper basket upside down to show that everything had been clean. Well, a rabbit tucked under an upside down waste paper basket provided a certain challenge to a teacher when she turned it up. And the rabbit went one way and she went the other. And you know what was kind of discouraging about that? The principal didn't come in and say, okay, who did it? They said, okay, Billy, come to the room. And the other one that I thought was indication of innovation, we had a great fourth grade teacher. She was so nice, and she loved to lecture with blackboard and chalk going back and forth. She was just a tad plump, and she was always dropping the chalk or the eraser. One day I brought to school a piece of old sheeting about like this. She, sure enough, dropped the chalk. When she did, I took that sheet and pulled it, and you could hear the rip all the way. Well, she got this horrified look, backed up against the blackboard and wouldn't move until the class was over. And once again, the principal says, "Billy." So, at any rate, I thought I'd just let you know that there's a dark side to everyone, and you heard some of mine. But more seriously, things were hard, things were tough. I had my first job when I was 12 at $1.25 a day, washing test tubes and slides in the county venereal disease laboratory. No gloves, no nothing. And I've since condensed this down to, as far as I know, I am the only 12-year-old boy who was exposed to every sexually transmitted disease known to God and man and had absolutely no pleasure out of it. The next year, I got upgraded. I found a job as a soda jerk in the local drugstore. In the summer, and this was for $2 a day, so I got a big increase in salary. But in the summer, my hours were from 7 in the morning till 9 at night, with an hour off for lunch. We called it dinner then, dinner and supper. And during that time, I had to go home and milk the cow, at least at supper. 5 days a week, it was 12 hours a day. On Saturdays, it was 7 till 10:30, and on Sunday, it was a choice. You could either work from 8 till 2 or 12 to 8. And you add them up, and it was about a 78-hour week. On that concrete floor at 13 and 14 and 15, if you got growing pains, standing on concrete, dishing out ice cream or selling bus tickets or Lotta Pinkham's drink or Dr. Tishman's unaccepted. By the end of the day, you're pretty tired. But in school, it was 2 afternoons and nights a week, plus the Saturday and Sunday hours. And at any rate, I upgraded and got a job with the Highway Patrol, highway repair people, and we had to unload railroad gondola cars of gravel. We didn't have much gravel down there, with scoop shovels, and it wasn't so hard when the truck was empty and the rail car was full, but when the rail car was getting empty and you had to throw that gravel out, this was 15, 16, and 17. But at any rate, it was, I learned early on that work did not bother me. Indeed, I enjoyed work. And my wife shakes her head and says, I never was oblivious to getting rid of that. So in high school, I played some football and 1 year in junior college. I told everybody that I was a second string in for the junior college. The only reason that I was second string, they didn't have a third string. I mean, that was all of it. If they'd had a third string, I would have been third string. But nevertheless, I did get to play some. At 17, thinking that I'd never get out of Moorhead, I joined the Naval Reserves. I became a seaman apprentice cook on a destroyer escort. And to my knowledge, once again, I never met anybody on that 200 plus people ship that had a rank lower than I did. That was an enlightening and educating experience. But brighter days ahead. I went to Mississippi State my sophomore year. I went 1 year to the junior college and met Dr. Giles. He taught me my first class in crop chemistry, and I was forever bitten about wanting to do a career in soil science. And my love of science, my love of the people in science, my love of the work that it took to get and the people that were doing it, that was 1949, and that has never left me. ROTC was with me. The Korean War had started. I started the first blood bank on Mississippi State campus ever, and the amount of blood we collected was the best that had ever been collected at a single unit in Mississippi. Graduated in '52 with both a BS and a ROTC commission. Got invited by my uncle to go out to Fort Bliss, Texas, and very soon they were short of lieutenants, which was kind of discouraging. And the reason they were short, I was discouraging. At any rate, they formed a new type of weapon called a Sky Sweeper Battalion. I ended up as headquarters battery commander as a second lieutenant, which was kind of rare. Did that until it was decided I should go over to Korea. Got in the 7th Infantry Division, Automatic Weapons Battalion, and once again I became a battery commander. Had a number of adventures, one of them being all of us from Mississippi, or almost. We were being stolen blind by a bunch of people, to the extent that my vehicles, a certain number of them, particularly my fighting vehicles, I had quad 50s on a half track and twin 40s on a full track. And it was dangerous. So I decided I would go down to division rear, and I checked out 6 shotguns, 12 gauge pumps, and a case of number 4 shot. And I got my guards, and I said, it's real simple. If you hear any noise, you can say, stop or I'll shoot, as fast as you can, and then take about a 20-degree arc and empty your gun and reload. And after about, it didn't take longer than 3 or 4 weeks, our theft went down to 0. And, but at any rate, I had a great time. One thing that did occur to me, and it has impacted my life since then, we were out on maneuvers, and I was to take care of a simulated attack, and I was running at night to one of our machine gun positions, and the captain had told me he'd put it a little slope. Turns out that's right, but going from my direction, it was about a 12-foot sheer drop. And this was at 3 o'clock in the morning, and I went sailing over like the little man in the comic strip. And I ended up with about 3 broken ribs, a broken arm, some fairly severe lacerations. Turns out they didn't know it, but there were 3 cracked vertebrae in my neck, and I had a concussion in which I'd lost about 6 months of memory, which came back, unfortunately. But seriously, it was bad enough that I got sent home. And from there, I headed for Purdue. Had a wonderful time. Once again, didn't know anybody, but got up there. Had a wonderful professor. Had some wonderful people met. Competed for and won the first year that the National Science Foundation had pre-doctoral fellowship competition. And that year they had 6 in botany, and my roommate, my lab mate, and I won 2 of the 6. And my major professor met that with his usual saying, well, I expected you to, and we went on about my business. By sheer accident, I ended up, I was planning on a postdoc at Oak Ridge. I had it lined up. The last minute they clubbed it, did away with it, and I went over looking for a job. Monsanto was coming in for interviews. I asked if I could, and they said, you don't qualify, this is only for undergraduates. So I walked out of the building, was called back by the woman that had told me that, saying somebody had just canceled. I had the interview with her and with Monsanto, and ended up in September working at Monsanto. Now, at that basis, I was with Monsanto 34 years, but more importantly, I think, I also met my good wife, who I've been with for 54 years. And so it was a double win for me. We were just beginning to find our way in agricultural chemicals. To give you an idea, we were 64th in the nation. We did well enough in what we found, what we did, and how we did it, that from 63 or 64, being 60th in the nation, by 73, we were number one in the world. And a whole lot of things enabled to do this. But the things that I learned, to believe in, from the land grant system of commitment, of caring for our customers, the farmers, for being absolutely honest, for asking for nothing but the best in research from our people, and having good products. We stayed the best in the world for 25 years, because after the first one, Ramrod, we then found Lasso, and that led us to Roundup, and of course Roundup then led us to the GMOs, and once again, after lag, Monsanto is now number one in the world. I might say to the graduate students here two things. First of all, from a selfish standpoint, thank goodness I don't have to compete with you. When I look at the quality of the work that you're doing, reading the synopsis of your work, you're doing outstanding work. I know things will look good for you in the future, but thank goodness I didn't have to compete with you. The second thing is, there's another way of looking at this. It takes two things to be what I call being a perennial freshman. You know, by and large, when somebody says, oh, you're acting like a freshman, it's an insult. You know, you don't know what but you turn the thing around the other way, and if you want to be a freshman, that means you're willing to take new challenges, to test yourself, to make improvements. So, in a way, the best thing any of us can do is to be a freshman again and again and again. Sometimes you don't have a choice about being a freshman. You get fired, you take a new job. You're moved to another part of the company, and you're a freshman again. You're a freshman when you're taking over some position in the church. But the key is two things. Love of learning, never lose love of learning, and remember that it will always be necessary and appropriate for you to never give up that love of learning. And with that recipe, plus the standards that you are exposed to in this great land-grant university, is about the closest thing you can do to get a guarantee that you're going to have a full and enjoyable life. I'd like to take just a minute and tell you a little bit about the chemical weapons thing, because it was so different than anything I ever did, it was almost like taking a vacation. In '78, it was not a good time to get interested in treaties. The Cold War was hot. The administration and the military were in about the worst shape they could be in. They barely talked to one another and frequently didn't. The resources weren't there. Industry and the regulatory agents were at each other's throats. So it wasn't a good time, but the State Department came to the Trade Association and said, we'd like to have someone to be an advisor or consultant as we pursue the Chemical Weapons Treaty. And I won't go into why, but I ended up getting the job. And I was involved for 25 years. But the first thing I had to do was to first build a series, I call it concentric defense lines. As Tom put it, I had to get the high ground. The first I did was get the executive committee behind me, then I had to get the board of directors behind me, then I had to get all the chemical companies behind me until they were not just reluctant, they were actively willing to have a chemical weapons treaty and all of the things that it brought to the impact, the negative impact it had on industry. I then went out to the organizations that are usually anti-industry and anti-chemical industry and convinced them that it was the thing to do and got them in line. I then went to the Australian, Canadian, Japanese, and the Western European countries, of which there were 18, and got all of those industry associations to form a coalition with us, and we presented a united front on support of the Chemical Weapons Treaty and all the meetings in Geneva and The Hague and so forth. We had one message, and we spoke for about 80 to 90% of the chemical industry in the world. And it made it almost certain that there would be a treaty, whereas most of the people will tell you that were involved, without industry support, there probably would not have been a treaty. It was just that simple. In conversations with the NATO groups and the chemical, I use the expression for industry to be talking with these people about a chemical weapons treaty was somewhat like the pig having a discussion with the chef about a ham and eggs breakfast. You have more than the ordinary interest in those discussions. And, but we set ourselves some standards. Number one, everybody heard the same thing from us. The Russians heard the same thing as the English. The French heard the same thing as the Japanese. The State Department heard the same thing as the Department of Defense. The Republicans heard the same thing as the Democrats when I testified before Congress, to the extent that the U.S. chemical industry, and there were only 6 of us involved here, we became known as the honest brokers of the convention. People, when they would be uncertain about anything or didn't want to do something, whether it was the Russians or Switzerland or whoever, they would come and ask us, say, what do you think about this? And we'd say, look, we don't like it. It's not very good. It's going to cost us money, but we don't know of a better way, and this, we think, is the right thing to have in the treaty. Whether we like it or not, it should be in here. And with that, they'd go away muttering, but they would vote in favor of it. So all in all, and you'll see a statement on the back of the book from the Australian who was U.S. ambassador and ambassador to the treaty, named Paul O'Sullivan. He says it very clearly and succinctly that there would not be a treaty without the U.S. chemical industry and me. So we feel like we did what needed to be done, and it was an effective way. By the same token, it was never dull. Towards the end, I'll tell you one story. The last meeting was in East Berlin. It was still under communist control. It was 1988, and things were looking pretty good. We showed up in East Berlin, and there's a man who I'd been working with over the years, and I was about as positive that he could be that he was CIA. And we were having a candid conversation over a cup of coffee. And I said, John, things are looking pretty good. He says, you're right. He said 3 things. Number 1, it looks like the communist Russian empire is going to collapse. I said, yeah. He said, number 2, there will be German reunification. That was when the communist bloc and the West Germans got together. I said, that's good. He said, yeah. And he says, because of that, or in addition to that, there will be a chemical weapons treaty. I said, man, that's great. He said, well, you're missing a point. He said, the East German Stasi, which is their secret police, who was probably the most evil, vicious one running around loose, and their specialty was blackmail. He said, well, let me tell you, tonight when the cocktail parties start, and you're going to be visiting with a lot of old friends and some old enemies, talking about things. I said, you're going to be sitting around a table of maybe 8 or 10, and all of a sudden you're going to realize that about 4 seats over from you is this extremely articulate, smart, good-looking, well-dressed woman. And said, she is really impressive. And in about another 10 minutes, you're going to decide that she really is impressed with you. In about another 10 minutes, you're going to think, well, gee whiz, she is nice. And he says, Will, when you have that thought, politely excuse yourself, get up from the table, go into the men's room, look in the mirror, and see that you're the same ugly son of a bitch that you were when you got up this morning, and go back and enjoy the thing. So I paid attention to him, and at any rate, we had a treaty, and then I ended up being the first U.S. representative to the advisory group on the Chemical Weapons Treaty, and it culminated in December of 13 with the treaty organization receiving the Nobel Peace Prize, which was very wonderful. And they have destroyed, there was about 200,000 tons of chemical weapons in the world when all of this started. And they had destroyed, in the presence of the treaty organization, all about 80 to 90%, in other words, 175,000 tons were destroyed. That's 180 to 75,000 tons that the terrorists couldn't get, the rogue nations couldn't use, there couldn't be some dreadful accidents. Now, did we get the other 10, 20%? No, but it will get there. And they did it without any fanfare, without any publicity, and did it very thoroughly and in a very professional way. And as opposed to some organizations and people that have received the Nobel Peace Prize for what they might do in the future, the Chemical Weapons Treaty Organization, OPCW, Organization for Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, received it for what they had done. I'd like to stop there. It's a good place to stop. And my question is, my first question, is there time for questions?
Probably take 1 or 2 if there's 1 or 2 questions.
Oh, okay. Well, let me say once again, I wish you all well. It's been a great ride for Helen and I. We've had a wonderful time. We were in places where, with organizations, we did a lot of good. And thank you for letting me come back and share it with you. Thank you.
I tell you what, this makes me so proud. I mean, it's Mississippi State. To all you students out there, that Mississippi State degree means something. Dr. Carpenter represents all of us, but we're so very, very proud to have him back on campus again. Helen, we're glad to have you here as well. Dean Fox, it's so good to see you again. Dr. Foyle, so glad to have you here. We've got a special little gift that we want to present to you. You take that out.
Oh, my goodness.
You might want to bring it. You know how to use it?
You know, I needed this when I had children. That's beautiful. Thank you, sir.
You bet. Thank you. Really, it was outstanding, and I'm so thankful for all of you for participating. We got a special relationship that we built with Monsanto, and like so many of our other industrial sponsors. Well, one of my good friend Anthony Mills here, and he's got something he wants to have to say.
I won't be long. I know we've got a program to get back to. First of all, I just want to, Will, that was outstanding. I really enjoyed hearing what you had to say. And I guess there's a message there to the graduate students. Just because you're devious right now, who knows? You might turn out to be like Will Carpenter. I just want to take a few minutes and just make an announcement about some things that Monsanto's doing here at Mississippi State University. We've always been a big supporter of Mississippi State University, especially graduate student studies. We are establishing the Will Carpenter Distinguished Field Scientist Graduate Student Fund here to honor Will Carpenter and his many accomplishments, but also to highlight our Distinguished Field Scientist program. Students that receive these assistantships will not only receive their education paid for by Monsanto, but they will also get a training and mentoring program that will prepare them to work for industry, which I'm really excited about. I think that's something that we really, really need in industry, and I'm proud to be a part of that, and I'm looking forward to working with students that get these assistantships. So thank you, and I'm looking forward to the future. Hope we can continue this down the road, really.
I'm Scott Willer. I'm the Associate Dean for the College of Ag and Life Sciences, and I just wanted to let you know about some opportunities as we sort of conclude the lecture today. Immediately following the luncheon over here to my left, there will be a book signing opportunity. You can purchase some books if you'd like, but if some of you may want to visit with Dr. Carpenter and Thomas Lawrence and Helen and others that are here today about his experiences, and you're welcome to do that, again, over here to my left as we conclude the luncheon. For others that are here, the grad student competition, the Future of Ag competition, will continue this afternoon, starting at 1:15 in the Boss Theater, and that's open to anybody. And so to the students, I congratulate you for participating in that all day today, to the faculty for putting that together and putting it on and organizing that, the industry judges that we have. So again, that's a competition that's been going on in its third year, I guess now, and it's really a credit to, it's spawned by the faculty across the division and mainly in the agronomic crop area, and we really want to plug that and appreciate that and hope the students will continue to come back every year and the faculty put students in that every year. And if you have an opportunity this afternoon, we'd love to have you in the Boss Theater just to sit in on a couple of talks if you'd like. I'm going to appreciate you doing that. There will be another book signing opportunity that will be in the foyer this afternoon between 2:45 and 3:15. So if you don't get an opportunity right after lunch, have to get to class, or from the students in the competition, please come back this afternoon if you'd like to visit one-on-one with Dr. Carpenter and others as well. We'd love to have you. Finally, I just want to say thank you. Again, there's a lot of people that go into organizing these types of events. Tiffany Williams, Beverly Catchod, and there are many others that helped with the table decorations, Mr. Charlie and his crew, all the faculty involved in the competition that goes on all day. And so, again, a big thank you to everybody, and maybe we'll recognize them as we adjourn. Thank you very much. I appreciate being here.